Hey y'all, you're listening to
Two Wives and a S.P.A.R.K.
As an interracial couple, we've learned a lot over the years, and we're committed to sparking conversations that build community and explore how race influences everything. Literally everything. So that's our focus for this podcast.
Because we believe that intentional conversations are vehicles for change. We've seen the power of them in our relationship over the years, and we know that when we really listen to each other and to ourselves, we see the truth in new and revealing ways.
I'm Lia.
And I'm Rachel.
You're listening to Two Wives and a S.P.A.R.K.
In this first episode, we want to start with something that's really important to us, which is really zooming in on our why. What is our motivation for this conversation? Why now? Why have conversations about race? Why do we feel like they're so critical? And we want to hold up the mirror for ourselves in this first episode, because that's really going to be a theme in this season.
Yeah, I think it's super important to start off with you all and sharing who we are, how we met, and how our stories and experiences have created a deep passion for this work to, as we said in the intro, literally talk about race because it's in everything and what is keeping us in this work.
So, do you want to kick us off and share a little bit more about why this conversation matters to you and what your motivation is as an individual?
Yeah, I think I've started to ask myself, instead of saying to myself, why you? I've started to ask myself, like, why not me? Like, why not share my story as a Black lesbian woman who is navigating so many different parts of this world in the skin that I'm in and the sexual orientation that I'm in. Now adding wife to that and homeowner to that, there have been super interesting experiences and stories where race has played a huge role in what we're creating, I think, as a family and as a unit. And I think across all spectrums of my life, I've grown to really see the power of understanding who people are and who people show you they are, but also who people would like to be. And I want to create a world for our future family, our future children, that's way better than the world we're currently in. And so if that means I have to stop staying silent and share my story and understanding of the world, then that's what that means. And the purpose is deeper than me. Like, I know that I probably will not see in my lifetime the outcomes of this, but it's worth saying something while I'm here and while I can.
Yeah. The power of the spark. I just keep coming back to, you never know the impact that one little conversation can have in one moment, one microsecond of a interaction or an encounter. And so thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your why.
Yeah. What would you say your why is in this work? What brings you to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an individual, there's so many clear whys that I feel are so present in our relationship and as a couple. But as an individual, coming to this work as a white woman, as someone who really, my journey started as a teacher, trying to figure out what did it mean to be in a classroom, be in a school, be a school leader over the course of a decade, like as a white woman in a predominantly non-white space. And so I think I've always, over the past 15 years, I would say I've been grappling with questions in my head. And then everything came to a head when we met, really. And I think that was about a decade ago when we first met on the professional front. We worked at school, and that's really when there was a new opportunity. I was also doing a lot of racial equity work as a school leader, and we had the opportunity to get this grant as a school. So that meant we had a racial equity coach assigned to our school, and we were doing a lot of work, and I was doing a lot of intellectual work professionally. But really, I think things came to a head when we started talking like in a different way, and our friendship began to blossom, and everything, kind of all the compartmentalized ways in which I had intellectualized the work really came to a head. And so then
she started flirting with me. That's really where the story picks up,
Okay, so then 8 years, fast forward 2 years, our friendship really blossomed. And it was truly, I had cross-race friends in different chapters of my life, but it was really different. This was meaningful and something that is just hard to put words to in a way. Like, our friendship really mattered to us and to me. And so then I started to notice the lines get blurred. I was starting to do more introspection outside of school too. I wonder how that came across, or like, how is my whiteness showing up here? Could I be a better listener? I just think I started grappling with questions like that. in our early on.
For me, I remember, our Tuesday talks for me as a Black woman who was trying to develop and grow in our school and under the leadership of someone who had a different identity than I did. I think I was just trying to navigate how to be in those types of conversations. And you were super helpful. I remember feeling safe and that I could trust you to help me navigate how to advocate for more money or how to name something that made me feel uncomfortable or how to just ask for more support in the role that I was in and more coaching and development. And that played a huge role and still plays a huge role. And I think how I see myself as a professional to this day and what I think I can advocate for. And when she started flirting, I was like, dang, she's giving me some love.
Let the record be straight. Leah started flirting first. It was definitely Leah. When everything changed, it was certainly, 8 years ago? 2014?
I'll wait till we're deeper into the season to tell y'all really who started first. But for now, we'll just let bygones be bygones.
And so that's when what we talk about is the nexus, right? The intersection, the place where the personal and the professional come together, the place where the head and the heart come together. And I think in this space, we talk about two wives and a spark because the spark is something bigger than just a intellectualized, people, I read this book, I did that thing, someone told me to do this, I listened. I think
even bigger than a moment.
Yeah, it's right? It's a transformative encounter, and fire represents something that changes you when you've experienced it. And so we don't want this to feel like a transactional experience. We're learning as we go. And we've had a lot of lessons along the way. And I think that for me was the biggest why. When we turn a corner and think about what's our why as a couple for doing this, why do we care about putting this out there and learning in public right now? I think it really is because we've had so many lessons that we've learned.
Yeah. And I think, again, across race in terms of our two identities has allowed us to see what then happens when our communities and our families come together and the power of healing and newness that feels really rich, but it's because of the space we've created that people have been able to come into a shared environment and build and connect with one another and feel like I'm a Black woman, but I could trust this white man that sits across from me. And we broke bread together and we had a deep conversation and we have so much in common. Yeah. And I think what we've learned in our relationship is the power of not just the spark, but the power of space. How that space is created and developed and valued really matters for folks to be able to do some of this, what we call healing work together. And I think that's a huge part of our why as well. We just got married almost a year and some change ago. Yeah. I'm like, what's today? We just celebrated our 1 year anniversary. And as we reminisced about our families coming together, it was a really beautiful experience to be able to see what our love can do. And I think what love can do, period, right? I think it can be very healing when it's really authentic and real. And that's also become a deeper part of my why is really keeping our relationship centered and its friendship and centered in its healing work and centered in the love that it wants to spread so that we can continue to do the work, not just for ourselves, but for the community around us.
Yeah, it really does come down to, at the end of the day, leaving the next generation better off. I think that's been a constant. And I know as we want to start building a family and our future children, we both think about this all the time, that if we don't do this right now, we do have a lot to lose, actually. Yeah. And there's too much at stake. I think just to get really real, the world is so divided right now. And there are so many people pointing fingers at each other. And we certainly don't have it all figured out, but we know that there's another way. There's another way to show up in these conversations. And we're going to talk about this in the next episode. But this work is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And so we want more people who have skin in the game out there with us that are really committed to the long haul. And that means we just got to show up. And I think that it's the same reason why we started S.P.A.R.K 5 years ago. We started this card game that was like a community building, inclusive experience because we just saw how divided the world was at the time. And it was like, there's another way. There's got to be a vehicle that can hold space for people to come together across differences and to share their stories. And so we'll talk more about that. But I think that really did catalyze. It was like a big aha moment, those first couple years with S.P.A.R.K and being in a community with people that we otherwise wouldn't have been in.
I would say, and otherwise wouldn't have had deep conversations with either. Like, I think we could have found ourselves, especially as educators, in community with folks who looked different from us. But I think we wouldn't have found ourselves having really deep and and genuine and real stories and conversations with folks that look different from us. And so I think there's power, again, in the space that S.P.A.R.K has allowed us to hold for communities and individuals that have become members of our community that we didn't know before. So I think that's a huge part of this experience and our growth and development and what has kicked off this conversation for us, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. We're sharing a lot of just our experiences and our stories and why we created this podcast and who we are. And of course, when you all are out there listening, we want to definitely know who you are and want you to be able to share with us what brings you to this podcast and to the work. As we continue to learn in public together, it'll be nice to know who's out there with us.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your why and your motivation for this work, because we really know that when things get hard, because they will, and they are, we have that motivation. Our why really grounds us and anchors us and reminds us that we have to keep going. If we don't have a crystal clear why, then we might get burned out. We might not feel like we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is really just something that we're so excited to bring to the table and to see how you all receive it. We really want this to feel like a unique exchange.
Yeah. And I think since we have each other in this conversation, we're also going to ask that you all bring a friend to this conversation, that you allow you and a friend to think through both of your individual whys and then what brings your why together in your friendship. And we'll ask those things week after week. Rachel, something we keep mentioning, I know you shared that we started S.P.A.R.K a number of years ago, but S.P.A.R.K actually stands for something.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And we'll be bringing that to the conversation. So you want to share with the folks what it stands for?
Sure. Yeah. So it is just because Lia talked about it's a space, it's a way of being. This is about conversation. It's an intentional kind of dialogue. And so what we found over the years is it helps us to have permission and an invitation to show up a particular way, to be on the same page with people. And so the S.P.A.R.K acronym stands for, the S stands for show up authentically. So we invite you to do that with us. We will do the same. The P stands for pause and listen. All in, whatever that means to you. Listen to what's said, listen to what's not said, listen to what you're feeling, and all the things, right? Listening is truly our power tool. And then the A stands for ask, with curiosity. Ask questions rather than assume someone's truth or assume something about someone else. Let's just have a spirit of curiosity.
I was just going to say, or assume that the intention was meant to be harmful. Ask questions to clarify.
Right.
So that you can be clear about how you should pause in that moment and feel in that moment. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's super important.
Because we're in this time, I know I'm pausing in the acronym and I shouldn't do it, but we're in this time, I can't help but say, we're in this like cancel culture time where there's this culture of instant gratification and, oh, that person made a mistake, so just delete. And like, I don't think we have enough space for curiosity. And I think there is a culture where people aren't assuming that people are trying to learn and grow as much as possible. And I think we feel really strongly about giving each other some grace because we know that this is hard work. And we know that there is, again, this marathon we're going to talk about next week. There's pain that comes with this work, and there's missteps, and there's fumbling and struggle. And so asking instead of assuming, that one just feels really important. So that's the A. And then the R stands for respect diversity, respect multiple perspectives. And we're going to do our best to be mindful of that. And we want you all to help us. We want to know all the different perspectives that are out there listening and joining us. And we want to be mindful of all the different layers of diversity that make us who we are. And then lastly, K, kindly expect messiness. Be kind when discomfort comes up. Kindness, self-compassion when we're feeling like things just don't feel great is so important because growth only happens when we experience discomfort. We feel some soreness in our muscles when we're growing and getting stronger. And so we just wanted to remind us that S.P.A.R.K acronym is going to be something we're going to honor and lift up every episode and just work on, especially as we show up with that stance. We invite you to do the same.
Yeah, I was doing such a good job of pausing and not interrupting the acronym because I know it becomes like challenging to remember, wait, what letter are we on? When you said respect diversity, I was also thinking about require it too. Require the diversity of opinion and the diversity of experiences because that only makes us each better human beings. When there's a lack of stories being shared or a lack of voices being heard, then man, do we sell ourselves short? And I think that when we respect diversity, we can also push to require that there is more diverse voices in the spaces and places that we are in.
Mm-hmm. And I think that means, like Leah mentioned earlier, we invite you to bring a friend, and we really mean it. We're in partnership with each other. Of course, we're married and we're here together, and it's not by accident.
She put a ring on it, y'all.
Because we know that conversations clearly don't happen one-sided. It's an exchange of ideas and thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And so we invite you to think about, whether you want to think of it, could be a coworker, it could be a partner, it could be a family member, it could be a best friend. But we invite you to also think about the diversity of that even too, to Leah's point. Like, who are you having conversations about race with? And just thinking about, who do I want to have more conversations with? Am I in a book club? Could this be a helpful common text to bring up in our book club? Is there a way that I can lift this up so that we have a common language upon which we can build off of? Because I think we need more of that.
Yeah, and I think throughout the season, continue to give different practices and ways to open up your worldview, and in some of the ways that we've done that ourselves. So I won't spend too much time on that point, but I do think we'll circle back to it throughout the season. I think it's going to be a good one to circle back to, because we've learned a lot ourselves and creating more diverse spaces in our world, and not only hanging out with individuals that look like us.
Yeah, for sure. That's truly the thing that continues to keep us growing in a lot of ways. It's one of those things. Speaking of which, do you want to close with one of our favorite quotes that kind of sets the tone for what we're going to be getting into?
Yeah, this is a quote that comes up constantly in our work, but also in our relationship. And we continue to come back to it because it just has so much power in it. And it is by Linda Christensen. And it goes, "Community isn't always synonymous with warmth and harmony. Politeness is often a veneer for understanding, when in reality it masks uncovered territory, the unspeakable pit that we turn from because we know the pain and anger that can dwell there. It is important to remind ourselves that real community is forged out of struggle. This is the crucible from which a real community grows." She offers so many nuggets in that. And so I would ask that we want to engage. I know this is all like audio and we're listening to each other, but we would love to just hear from you all, like, what part of that stands out to you and are speaking to you, or did you lean in towards, and what stood out to you?
And we'll put the S.P.A.R.K acronym and the quote in the show notes below. And that quote was by Linda Christensen, again, from a book called Reading, Writing, and Rising Up, Teaching About Social Justice in the Written Word. And it might be helpful. You said we talk about this a lot in our work, but we didn't actually say what we do for a living. You want to share more, just how we identify professionally, what you do?
I was going to make a joke and be like, well, Rachel's my sugar mom. I still said it, but I like to say that. She does. Lots of love for our family. I am a director of student affairs and services at a public Montessori here in Austin, Texas.
Nice.
Yeah. And I've been doing similar work that I'm doing now for the last almost 10 years, or this is year 10, I should say. So almost 10 or 10 plus years. And I got into education because in a lot of ways it was my safe haven growing up, and I wanted to and still want to create safe havens for children all around the world. I do really believe that schools can be a place of safety and healing when we do it right. So
that felt important for people to know. Some people who don't know us super well, maybe, like, we facilitate conversations about race a lot in our work. Yeah. So it's an interesting intersection where you are truly one of the most skilled facilitators that I know. And you facilitate dialogues and restorative justice circles and hold space for healing and adults of all walks of life to come together and engage in conversations about race. So it's an interesting layer of our dynamic because we both do this professionally, you know?
Yeah. What do you do professionally?
Yeah. So after the sparks flew at the school that we worked at 10 years ago, and then I moved on 6 years ago. So I was there 4 years, and then I got into doing more facilitation and consulting work. So I've been doing facilitation around equity, racial equity, inclusion, antiracism work for about 6 years now. And after working at the National Equity Project, when I started S.P.A.R.K, that's when, created my own company. So I have the gift and the privilege of working alongside such amazing folks on Team S.P.A.R.K, and I get to hold space for conversations about race and equity and inclusion and diversity and anti-racism on a daily basis. And we partner with clients, organizations, and help them make progress on their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. And a lot of that means I'm facilitating conversations, a lot, hard conversations, and I'm learning as I go. I'll always be a work in progress, but I do think it's a unique thing that we both just happen to do this professionally, and then it shows up in our life so personally and so close to our hearts as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a beautiful moment that we are in, both in our relationship and professionally, that I think is necessary for us to document. And this is going to be one of the ways that we do that. And I was just looking at some of our notes just now, and one of the things that stands out that I think we should just share as a question that we're grappling with and trying to answer in all facets of our life is just what's necessary for, we talk a lot about sparks, right? These sparks, these moments, these movements that lead to bigger changes. But what's necessary for these sparks to change to lead to racial harmony rather than injustice and inequity? And I think that's something we continue to grapple with and are trying to answer, right? What is necessary? What is a non-negotiable?
Right.
And I think speaking up and sharing our story is a non-negotiable. And learning in public is a non-negotiable. And staying at the table is necessary and non-negotiable. So we'll definitely get more into that this season for sure. And we cannot wait to hear your questions and hear from each of you that's out there listening.
Yeah, we would love to hear what you all want to hear more of. Of course, this first season is just going to be a couple months, and then we're going to take a pause. And every step of the way, though, we want to hear from you. We have some thoughts and ideas about episode focus areas and topics, and we've gotten some input already from our community with questions and thoughts. And so we'd love to hear from you in terms of what did this intro episode spark for you, and what are you excited to hear more about and talk more about and grapple with us?
Yeah, for sure. All right, friends, with that,
we are excited to keep this going, and we'll share more in just a second about where you can find us on social media and how we can keep the conversations going between now and next Tuesday. But keep an eye out and an ear out for these episodes to drop on Tuesdays, and we will look forward to hearing from you all. Sending lots of love and light. Take care, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today, y'all. We'd love to stay connected on Instagram and Facebook, so you can find us at 2 Wives and a Spark, all spelled out.
If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend so we can keep the sparks of connection going. If you want access to our episodes as soon as they drop, click that subscribe button. Every rating and review helps others find us, so thank you in advance for letting us know what you think.
And special shout out to Journey Girl Magic Productions.
I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
Thank you for listening to 2 Wives and a Spark.